Hello, everyone. So if I pop up out of my seat, it's because my lights went off in my room. Okay, so they do that if I don't move a whole lot. And I can't imagine I'll be moving a whole lot throughout the presentation. So our focus of our slideshow today is choosing a topic and setting up a journal. Now, just to let you know that we have gotten permission to do digital notebooks this year. So I'm going to kind of show you both as we go through that when we get to that portion of the slideshow. And feel free to, ask a question. You can just unmic and just stop me if you have a question. There is a slide at the end for questions, but, please feel free if there's something that you want to ask. I'm hoping this is more of an informal presentation than if I'm at school or something. So feel free to stop at any point and ask questions. I did leave this on from Karen's presentation, 2 weeks ago, Karen, just so people had the region people, the names who represent the region, if you need to get in contact with any of them. The Massachusetts Fair is going to be between the May 12th, May 19th, and we're still determining the dates for the regional fairs. That information
will pop in quick, Lisa. We did meet with regional chairs just this past Monday, so be on the lookout in the next week or so with the requirements that we are going to set forth for regional and the state fair. So that will be coming very shortly, just in terms of the virtual fair and what the requirements will be for students. So we will be sending that out in the coming week or two.
Good. Yes, and Karen, if you want to add anything, please, as we go through this. I know you've done this enough, so if there's anything that I'm missing, please make sure you pop in. So this is basically the process that students go through, and I highlighted the two top topics because that's what our focus is today. There'll be 2 other workshops coming up in November that will address other bullet points on this on our middle school process for students. So, when we were looking at the different topics to present, I always think of choosing a topic as a challenging event, because everyone's like, oh, just pick something you like. It's not that easy. And middle schools always want to eat something, drink something, interview somebody, or play with their animals, or work with vertebrate animals or something. So it is not that easy. And I don't, and I feel bad when students get frustrated, and they just they're like, I'll just do anything. I'm like, well, no, because this is going to go from pretty much October to May. You need to like your topic. So I thought that this was a good place to start. What I do up front when I meet with my middle school students is I try to tell them some of the guidelines if they're interested in participating in the regional fair. Our school does not have a science fair. I don't know where you're at. Everybody's at a different place, but at my school, we run our science fair as a club after school. And then I take the projects, like the 10 projects, to represent the regional fair. And some years is a few more, and some years is not quite 10. So I know this year is going to be very different, but I am going to offer the fair after school virtually. So I don't know what your plans are for your students. I have done the fair and another system I was teaching in class, and I think that's very different. You can structure it like a class lesson. So, basically what I go over can be kind of adopted into in class or an after school kind of a model. So the first thing, again, I talk about rules. The big rules that I mentioned right up front for students is inhalation and ingestion. They can't smell things, they can't eat things, they can't put all this stuff on their skin, because these are the ones that kids are interested in. And I hate to have them waste time looking up a topic if right up off the bat I'm going to say no. And I do feel bad about that. So that's like my first talk, is going over some of the rules. And I also tell them that they can't work with vertebrate animals. And if they are going to work with invertebrates, we do talk a little bit about ethical behaviors with their animals or their pets or their invertebrate organisms. Then another thing I want students to consider is working with human subjects. Now this year, I am very much discouraging that unless it is totally a survey where they can send that out. But the students have to have a human consent form for every single person that participates in their survey. And sometimes, students say, oh, I have 3 or 4 people. I said, well, 3 or 4 people is not going to give you enough data points. So, they need a good amount of data. So for some students, that is a little bit of a challenge. They love to do the listening to music and the heart rate, and they love to get their feelings about music and all. So I do try to steer students away from this topic because some students are so disappointed when they've planned for this group of students to work on it and they don't show up, and so they do feel bad. So I'm very honest with them up front. On the Massachusetts Science Fair site, they have a handbook, and it is 2019, but the rules are basically the same. So I'm going to click on that because page 5 just gives an overview of the rules. Let me just get this. It's a nice little handbook for students, and it is at the high school level as well. This, I think, has been adopted for the middle school division. But so here's some of the basic rules that I like to talk with students about, because another thing students like to do, they like to throw things and shoot things. And so that's something I say, well, we really can't do that, paintball guns and all that. So before they get too excited about a topic, I tell them the things that I'm excited for them participating, but these are the things that you probably want to stay away from if you're considering going to the regional fair. And most of my students who do this fair, because we don't have one at school, they're doing it because they want to go to the regional fair. And this can be, like I said, accessed through the state science fair website. It's actually under the student tab, student work, not under the teacher tab. So students see this who are working on their science fair projects. Let me go back to my slideshow. Okay. Oh, sorry. So what we talk about for traits for a good experimental topic, I say, you can't have it too general. You have to have something that's really measurable, something that you can generate some questions with. We talk about independent and dependent variables. So it depends. My 8th graders have more of a background in their independent and dependent variables. The 7th graders are just coming to us from another school, and they have really not worked with those terms a whole lot. So I do give a little bit of a little lesson about independent and dependent variables. So it depends where your students are at when they come in. So it is, it's challenging for students to come up with original ideas. I know everywhere you look, it says students need to do an original project, an original idea. And I understand that, but there's, there's only so many ways you can change something. So if some students are interested in doing something with chromatography, we really try to look at all of the different options that you could do, maybe changing up the variable. You can be original, but you want to make sure that it's also measurable. If they're doing an engineering design project, they have to be able to build, test, and evaluate a prototype. So that's something else, unless they're doing a math project. So I have had students do math projects in the past, and that's a little bit different. So I work with them a little separately on the side to help develop their project. We have behavioral projects where I have had students analyze data. They've actually they've coded and they've made their own algorithms for taking a whole lot of data that already exists. They didn't collect the data, but it already exists in a database somewhere. And they have been able to, like I said, make an algorithm to analyze that data. So there are exceptions to just your typical scientific method experiment or your typical engineering design experiment. Lots of coding coming into play. Kids have been making apps and that. So it's been interesting to see some of the different ways that kids are doing. When we say science fair, they're starting to do things a little bit different. And I do encourage that. And I know a lot of teachers encourage that as well. One of my big things for students is just to keep in the back of their mind is if I have more than 10 projects, I have to select them. And I tell them one of the things I look for is if they're doing an experiment using this scientific inquiry, scientific method, I am looking for a minimum of 100 data points. And that gets them thinking about their project type. How can they get at least 100 data points? And we talk about data. You never can have too much data, but you also need to be able to explain that data.
I think Marianne used to say, data's like money. You can never have enough of it. I think that's her phrase for her kids.
Yes, and actually that was in my head, and I'm like, oh, Marianne's, I'm
Yeah,
glad
okay,
you mentioned that. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, she's always said that, and it's so true. So true. So up to this point, am I going too fast? Is everything okay?
Sister Jean, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up.
I did, but I don't want to interrupt the thought here. But see, in my situation, I teach the scientific method, and they all have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
and that, yeah.
However, because of the COVID, we're not going to have a science fair, but everyone is going to do a science assignment using the scientific method. So they have to do a project, but I don't call it a project.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go from there. But that's just something we do. So grade 6 through 8 have to do, and I do teach the scientific method mostly with what I'm doing, as best as I can during COVID times.
Yes, exactly. And because I have more flexibility after school, I can be a little bit more, you can pick and choose. But when I was teaching it as part of my class, I did primarily focus on the scientific method. So you have to do what works for you, definitely. And we just have an added layer this year of difficulty trying to get projects. I know we don't want to call project, but trying to get this done. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my next slide. And when choosing a topics, I have some helpful tips that I was just thinking about when I was planning the slideshow. We've always encouraged students to work together because that's what science is all about. But it is going to be a little bit more challenging to do that at this time. So I have not started my virtual fair yet, and I actually have to because we have hybrid and remote students, so they're all eligible to participate. So I need to wait for my students to get home. So it will run a little bit later in the afternoon. But if they do choose to work together, I'm going to make sure the parents are aware that that they do not need to go to each other's house. And I'm discouraging that. They can work together virtually, but there is not a requirement that they have to be in the same room with each other. So that's something for you to think about. Are you going to allow your students to even think about having a partner? Right. And many of us are saying no at this time. Another thing I want students to keep in mind, supplies. So sometimes students are like, oh, my parents will buy me this, that. And I'm like, well, okay, so this little instrument costs $200. I don't think we really need that. So I right up front, I do talk about, sometimes I feel like I'm saying, okay, you can't do this topic, you can't do this, you can't do this, and watch money. But sometimes I feel like, but then I say, but I'm doing this now to save you time later on. So keep those things in mind when you're looking for your topic. So keep the costs in mind. And I say whatever materials I have, they can use my materials. But if I don't have something, I do look up the cost for them. So as soon as they come up with a topic, we sit down and we think about, okay, what are your plans with this? And we try to come up with the materials list once we narrow down the topic. I also share a timeline with my students right up front. And I'm sure you all do that as well. But they want to, I encourage my students, some of them have these grandiose ideas and they're wonderful, but are they realistic to finish and the time that we have? We were meeting just once after school a week. And some weeks, if there was a holiday or something that we weren't meeting. So in a lot of students, they have homework and other things. Are they really going to be working on this in their free time? So I have them keep that in mind. I'm going to just share a sample timeline that I had last year. I know we got canceled last year, but this is just a timeline I'm just going to share that I had. So basically, I give some general notes about the notebook, the journal, and then I have them share a Google Doc with me. They have to make a slideshow as well, and they can't use words like better and best. No pronouns allowed in the lab report. Those are just some general notes I keep at the top of the timeline so that they don't forget, because I go over them so much. So I basically kind of do it by a month kind of scenario, and this is like their checklist box on the right. That's not something, you may not do it that way. You might want to do it by week. But if you're teaching this during your class time, you're more structured in your project if it's a class assignment. So basically October and November, some students, it takes October, November, and sometimes to the very end of November for them to even choose a topic. They're just so excited about so many things. And no matter how many times I, say, okay, let's narrow it down, let's cross them off. They just, they can't make that commitment. So you're always going to have a few of them, but I really, really, for students to be on the right track, I get, 3 to 4 weeks, I think that's what I use as my kind of gauge for them to choose a topic. And the students who struggle with that, they're often the ones that really don't always finish their project, and I feel bad about that. November, December, we work we get a lot of research done as soon as they get their topic, and I'll talk a little bit about research when as I go on in the slideshow. But they also have to get that approved by me. I don't know what your setup is for your school, if you're doing after school, if you have high school students helping you. I have had some in the past come and they check in with certain students, or if you're doing it in your classroom, you might have that as an assignment, so they have to submit their work. They really want to have their question or problem and their hypothesis and their materials list and all. I like it by December, but many of the times we go through and it's January. If they're working with plants, anything I encourage, the earlier the better for that to get started and to collect their data. So pretty much January, February, and March are big experimental time for students. Now, some experiments are just going to be after school. They can finish it 2 or 3 times after school. Obviously, this is virtual now for us and probably for many of us. So they're going to have to find an opportunity to do that at home. So safety is another thing that's very important. What are they doing? What are they working with at home? That's another whole level of consideration we need to think about. By the end of March, they really should have their lab report really filled in, and I encourage them to work on that as we're going through. And on a shared doc, I can actually add comments as they're going through as well. And but I will tell you, April vacation has not always been a vacation, because some students are still like, I have to do this, I have to do that. And I'm like, are you sure you want to participate in the fair? If you need, I don't want you to be stressed out over this. And many times April vacation becomes that push to the end for some students who got a late start. And then I always give some poster board tips, but we're going to talk, maybe Karen can mention at the end when we have questions a little bit about our poster board / presentation options. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow. So still on choosing a topic, some students, as much as you make a specific way of listing their favorite idea, maybe their hobbies, what they're interested in, we narrow it down to get it down to 3 topics. We list questions about each topic, and then I want to try to have them eliminated to 2 topics. Some students need more support. So you probably all heard of the Science Buddies, and I let my students use Science Buddies, but not the experiment that Science Buddy says. They have to change it. They can use it to help get them interested in certain ideas. The topic selection wizard is good for students who are just really having a hard time coming up with their own ideas. It's a survey. And what I like about the survey is at the end, there's like a section, so the student maybe, and it seemed to navigate towards physics or towards anatomy and physiology, and it lists a bunch of different experiments. Now, I won't let them choose the experiment as is. They need to change the variable, they need to change something in it. But it's a good place if some students are struggling with knowing what to do. I will say at this point, all of the judges know Science Buddies experiments. And when Science Buddies first came out, there was so many of the same experiments in there, but it's about learning, and some students need that structure to guide them. But if we can just tweak it a little bit, change it to make it their own, that's been helpful for students.
I like, Lisa, how you can like attach that to Google Classroom if you were doing it in class, how it links with Google Classroom.
Oh yeah, yes. Now, yeah, I think all these things are kind of, everything links now to Google Classroom. It's so funny, like everything you do now. And I end up, for my students, I don't know what you use for your platform, for your students, I do have a science fair Google Classroom. So everything is on there. Students can comment, I can email, I can post all of the different things on there. So I'm not sure exactly, other people, you may use different platforms for that. Here's another science fair project ideas, education.com. They have some good things. Now, you have to keep in mind that Science Buddies, education.com, all these places, they don't go by the rules that the regional or state fair rules go by, because here you can eat things, drink things, smell things, you can do all sorts of things. So I tell students, they're like, but it says you can do it. I said, no, that site says you can, but you can't chew them for the for the project. So what we did, I remember one year, I think we had some kind of a structure that they actually pulled the gum like they were chewing it, so they could still use it as an experiment, but they were not ingesting it. How Stuff Works is a good site. The summer interns for the Massachusetts, for the State Science Fair, there was many summer interns, and they had the 6 hats topic evaluation that they recommended doing. So I'm going to click on that. I have never done this before. They recommended it. So they have like this little evaluation. So there's different hats to it. And I guess what they do to kind of put your topic on there, there's like a logical, the optimist, somebody plays the devil's advocate with their topic. Someone looks at the emotional part of it, creativity part, and is it manageable? So you have some different, you can put on the different hats, or from what I gleaned from this activity is that you can have different students put on the different hats based on the topic that the student wants someone to look at. So they're actually asking other students for feedback using the different hats. Like I said, I've never done it before, but some interns had some really good ideas. And Karen can probably address that, because there is going to be kind of like a handbook at some point going out as well. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever used Padlet or Jamboard. This is just another opportunity for students to get feedback. Let me turn on my lights.
And we can share this presentation with you guys also, just so you guys have these websites that are linked here.
Yep. So you want students to be able to provide feedback if they're having trouble coming up with their topic. That's what I liked about having it after school. Like, kids would bounce ideas off of each other. So I'm hoping when we do this virtually that I can still do that. So Padlet, and it's going to link automatically to my Padlet. It just does that. I can remove the link when we share it, Karen, but no matter what I did, it automatically went to mine. So if you're not sure, you can go in right through your Google accounts, and it's like sticky notes. Let me just see. You can make a Padlet. There's all different kind of Padlets that you can make, and you can see the templates here. I tend to use for my classes a little more structured one, the Shelf. But here, this Canvas, where you can kind of have things like a flow chart on there. There's so many different kind of ways that you can set that up for students. And then Jamboard is another nice one. It's like a whiteboard online. And many of the times I will just add, well, let me see if I can find one.
I love Jamboard. I've been using it in my classes, like to
Mhm.
like one of mine is anatomy and physiology. They had a label bones, and so and answer
Mhm.
questions. I make text box or the sticky notes like this. It's been
Yeah.
great.
It is. I had one said, this is from adults when I had my mentor program, but I had, when I did one for observations for something, I have to just make sure students aren't making their own extra Jamboards. That's the problem. I'm like, no, you're supposed to be on Jamboard 7. They're like, but Mrs. Greenwald, Jamboard 7 isn't the right one. I'm like, because someone added 3 Jamboards before that. So for middle school kids, sometimes this can be a bit of a challenge. But if you are working with a small group for science fair, it can become very helpful for feedback for your topic. So what I would have students do is write like 2 main topics, their ideas, and then post suggestions or comments. Any questions up to this point? Or feedback or comments? Okay. So I'm gonna, you'll have to unmic because I don't have my grid on to see everyone if you did want to say
Yeah,
something or type
anyone-
something in the chat.
Yeah, I think we're good so far.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I just wanted to show you a picture of a journal, a hard copy journal of brainstorming. And, you know, some of my students, this one, this was a 2011 one. I couldn't find anything more recent. That's kind of bad that I could keep my 2011. So this has been a while ago. But you know, many students are afraid to just write things down and brainstorm, and they just want to rip out those pages and start again. And I said, no, the judges and people in the scientific community like to see your train of thought. They like to see how you went, what your path was that actually led you to choose the topic that you chose. So I really do like students to write things down, cross things out, like put a line through it. We talk about one little line. I get scribbles though all the time, but anyways, it's just it's a work in progress for them. So it shows their train of their thought process. You know, you start in October, you show your project in May. A lot of work went into that, and choosing the topic is a major part of that work. So that's going to lead us into our second part of the presentation, the journals. So because we're in such different times right now, we have gotten approval to use digital notebooks. So I'm going to kind of show you both. I had a couple templates that I thought of using this year. Now, normally, you know, my students use, you know, a composition book, and they have the tabs. I've never done a digital one. They do use spreadsheets. They do make a slideshow. They do use Google Docs. So they still have things on their computer, but everything they do goes in this journal. So now I'll give them the option, but I am going to tell them at this point, everything's virtual. It may be easier just to keep their notebooks digital. So these are some basic requirements that I came up with. Well, I didn't actually come up with them. They were in the handbook from the Massachusetts Science and Engineering Fair. And there's still some more that I didn't put on there, but it's mostly geared towards high school. Like all of my kids don't sign the bottom right-hand side of every page, but I like them to see that that's what scientists do and that's what they do at the high school level. I do try to model as closely as I can what they do at the high school level, because many of my students will do the club at the high school when they get there, and I want them to have some good habits. And you know, they have to write in blue or black ink and be consistent throughout the journal. Neat and legible, in chronological order. We date every entry. I do have students who write on the back of the page. I do try to remind them, generally speaking, that they don't usually do that. But honestly, I don't think the judges have not penalized them for any of that. It's mostly just what some of the criteria is at the upper levels in the science fair for keeping a journal. and mistakes aren't scribbled out. I try to encourage them to make one single mark through it. They all want to white it out. They all want to rip out the pages, but I tell them not to do that. They have to see, judges like to see your process. And, you know, I say, what about in a year or 2 or 3 from now? Wouldn't it be nice to go through your journal and see what your thought process was when you were coming up with your ideas and taking you from the beginning to the end? The tables do have to be handwritten. That's what they say in the handbook, and they do write them, but they also use Google spreadsheets, and they can print out graphs, and I actually have them also print out the tables. So they do both, and they tape them into their journal. I actually have them write their name on the cover. I've never had them title the experiment, but I found that, and something I was reading that they were supposed to do that, but I haven't done that. Inside, I think they've written it, but on the cover, they have not. They should always have a table of contents inside the front cover or on the first page. So I'm going to go on to the next slide because this kind of, I'm going to show you some visual examples. The summer interns, one of them put their journal up on, took pictures of it, the hard copy, and I wanted you to see some of the pages. But these were some of the highlights up on the left here: brainstorm, research, purpose, question, hypothesis, experimental outline, your design, data table. These were kind of the sections of your journal. I'll try to show you some of my samples I made for the digital notebooks, and then a works cited at the end. I know this slideshow, this presentation isn't about analysis and conclusion, but I did put a few little things in there that I had found in that handbook or in the summer intern handbook and on the Massachusetts Science and Engineering Fair site. You know, I added, you always look for patterns. So I actually, and I'm sure you do this as well, especially if it's in your classroom, you teach them how to analyze data, because they're 7th graders or 6th graders, 6th graders, 7th graders, and 8th graders. Now, 8th graders do have more experience with that. They don't know how to analyze data. So you do need to show them. And you do need to show them often, especially 6th and 7th graders, you have to show them how to use Google spreadsheets. I don't know, maybe your system, you know, has lessons for that, but I'm finding that I need to actually incorporate that into my science fair kind of work that we do. Show them how to collect data, show them how to look for patterns, how to reference the data. I actually give, I don't know if you want to call them sentence frames, sentence starters. I think it's more called sentence frames in order to write their conclusion. You know, I have them, they have to put, like, you know, their question or problem. This is for the scientific method. Their, you know, their hypothesis, or their, do I accept, or, and they can't use pronouns, I say I, but they're not allowed to use pronouns. Accept, reject, use data to support that. You know, I have really structured it so that they come up with a legible paragraph. This is hard for middle school students to do. I mean, it's still hard for high school students, but they've had more experience. Middle school students, this is a challenge. So that, I know this isn't what this slideshow is about, but in my science fair work with the kids, this is a good chunk of time analyzing their data. So let me show you some of the examples that the summer intern have. These are not mine. Okay, so I wanted just to make sure people knew that. So they have a table of contents. They have it on the first page, and they have the page numbers. And obviously the students can't fill that in until after they're done, but they can start writing their main ideas on the left side and then filling in their pages. And this is where they had, these are high school students, so they've had their signature on there. So you'll start to see, this is some experiment notes. They actually have day 2 and they put the date on there. And so they're going, I'm just going to go to, here's a part where they list their materials. And the reason I'm sharing this, because they actually have this in the handbook, so they're sharing it, they're comfortable sharing it with other people. A drawing of their setup is important. Sometimes when the students are doing that, you know, we all encourage picture taking because, you know, in 10, 15 minutes, they have to tell their judge what they've been working on from October to April, pretty much. And so having as many pictures as possible, both hand drawn and actual pictures, are very important. data analysis, they have their, so this was, I just wanted to show you, they did tape in a graph here, but I am going to show you their tables. They have tables in here. This, oh, so that's their conclusion, but where's their tables? I know they have that in here. Another thing, they showed the back of the page not written on. Oh, so here's their handwritten table right here. And this is also, I'm sure, inputted on spreadsheets as well. But, you know, you have to have that in your journal because, you know, that's what you do with lab work. And then their works cited. Now, this works cited is methodically written by hand. I do use Noodle tools at school, and I do let the students, they put like their book and often some main information, but I don't have them write the full works cited in their journal. I have them input everything on Noodle tools and just kind of make reference in their journal. But this student really went beyond and put it in correctly in the right format on here. Okay, so I'm going to go on to show some examples. Are there any questions right now at this point? So this is more digital examples that I'm going to show you. So like we said, bound notebook or digital lab journal this year, where that's being allowed both at the regional and state and Massachusetts state level. The digital notebook. So I was thinking to myself of either doing Google Docs, Google Slides. Someone mentioned Penzu over the summer. So I actually made a Penzu account over the summer. I'm actually going to click on that first. So I mean, you may like it. So I'm just gonna, I won't share my feedback yet. So hang on. It's fine. You do log in through your school. This is a free version. Now you can go pro. So I set this up in the summer. I would have called it Science Fair. You get an email like constantly, make sure you update your journal, write in your journal, right? It's like, okay. But there's also, you can post entries and it's fine. It's good. I don't know how the printing of this comes if you want to actually print this out. I'm not sure how that works. I did not investigate that much, but yesterday I started to, or yeah, I think it was yesterday, I started to say, all right, I'll make some entries like topic research, brainstorming. So you can do that and you can type on it. But like I said, I don't know. I think you can print things and you can insert images and all of that. So it's fine. If people like that, I'm going to, I will put that option out there for my students. I think I was just tired of getting the emails every day. And then also they have an option for you to get the paid version, which does a lot more. So I will go back and show you, well, actually, since I'm down showing something that already exists. So what I was really excited about at one point, and then I realized it wasn't going to work last year, it was Google Science Journal. I could not get it on my computer and kids could not get it on their Chromebooks. Now, I don't know if that's changed, but you could get it on your phone. And it was really neat to get on and use it out in the field. But now Google is not going to support that anymore. Arduino is now going to support that, but I did link it here in case anybody wanted to, get the app and get more information about that, because it's all about providing resources and seeing what's going to work for you and for your students. So for Google Docs, so what I thought for my students, I'm like, okay, I could do just simple Google Doc and set it up for them. So I'm going to do the scientific method one first. I'll share that with you. So I made some updates on this today. I was just kind of thinking about some of the things I'd want to do. So I find with the digital notebooks, I can actually guide students a little more. I can even probably put some, sentence starters and for the kids who struggle, and some just like links on there for them to go. So there's just more options for me to help them with a digital notebook. Believe me, I do like in terms of a scientist using the journal, but for emerging scientists, students who have never done this before, I see the benefits of me being able to support them easier using an online journal. So I did bookmark everything so they don't have to keep scrolling down. So these would be the main topics that they would have to work on throughout their time from, you know, October, and I'm a little later starting this year, but October to April, May, whichever. So I'm going to click on section 5. So it'll bring me right down to that page. And what I have done is just left it blank for them to fill in. But like I said, I could put prompts here. I could put the definitions of an independent variable. I could put the definitions of a dependent variable there for them so they wouldn't forget. I've also linked my table of contents so that they don't have to keep scrolling, because this could get very long. So this could get like a very long document. So it was kind of important to kind of bookmark the pages so that they're not just continually scrolling down. And my pages got a little bit mixed up, but I mean, like the formatting of that will move. And then later they can add their page numbers here. And the engineering one is just, it's this basically the same setup, but with just guiding them through the topic. See, that's what students sometimes have trouble with. They forget that, oh, that's right, I am supposed to write my materials down. I know what my materials are in my head. And sometimes in their journal, when I'm looking at them, I'm like, but you never put your brainstorming of your materials list to begin with, and then your final list. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. But now you can have some control over it and give them these little pointers on here. And this is the same, I basically kind of use the same thing, except I just use the topics that the students would do if they were using the engineer design process. And it's pretty much the same setup as the other one, but it gives them a guideline. Now there's also something else that I've been kind of working with. I don't know if anyone's used, I mean, Google Slides, you could just do Google Slides as your journal. But I don't know if anyone's used Master Slides before, where students can't move things around. And this is just a very basic one because I kind of thought of it the last minute. So I was just doing it at the last minute. So let me show you this sample. So it just looks a little snazzy, that's all it does. And so basically with Master View, students can't move certain things around. Like they couldn't delete this even if they wanted to. But I put here, they can type in their name. So you basically control what they can move and what they can't move. You can link the tabs on here as well. And that's kind of what I did. Normally what I would do is I would already have the tabs on these pages as well, so they could link back and forth. But let me just pretty much present it. So you could link it and it would take you to that page, and you can set up, and so they can't get rid of these lines no matter what they do, but they can type on it. So here for the table of contents, they can type, but they can't delete table of contents. Because I don't know about you, but when I give my students sometimes slides to do for work, and I say, okay, complete slide 3, 4, and 5, and then all of a sudden there's like 4 slides in front of 3, 4, and 5 because they just kept hitting enter and adding new slides. So this prevents them from adding new slides. They also used to, some of the students I noticed like would delete my questions. They're like, oh, I didn't know we were supposed to do these questions. I don't have them. Because all they have to do is click on it and hit the backspace and they're gone. And sometimes they don't notice that. So this actually helps you to freeze. It's almost like in spreadsheets where you freeze certain cells. So it's the same thing. And I know this isn't a place for a lesson for this, but there's lots of videos out there for it. You just go into View and Master, and that's pretty much how you work with it, through that view. And then you choose which slide you actually want by getting off the Master View and this plus button, picking the slides that you actually want to work with in your slideshow. So that was just a thought I had. Students can't delete things, but they can add things that I would want. And so they can't say, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do the analysis and conclusion, because they may have deleted that slide by mistake. Let me see. So basically that takes us through the choosing a topic and then kind of working with a notebook or journal. And there is a chance for questions right now, but I was just going to show you the slide. I left this from Karen's presentation. These are the next two presentations: setting up an experiment and analyzing your data and writing a conclusion. But I'm gonna stop talking because I think I did a lot of that.
That was great. No,
Sorry.
a lot of those. And so if we share this presentation, Lisa, will they be able to click on those links and see your examples and everything?
Yeah, so I made the link so anybody with the link can access them. They're not just for Westboro. And if my email's on here, and if by chance for some reason they can't, and I don't know why some of my things that went through you and Helen actually default to my personal email, but it doesn't matter. People still should be able to open them up.
Okay, perfect.
Regardless.
Does anyone have any questions? That was awesome, everything in there. Thank
Should
you.
should I stop presenting or?
Yeah, you can stop
Okay.
presenting. Yep.
So my email is on here when we send that out if you do have any questions. So let me just stop presenting. Hang on.
Mhm.
All right, I'm good.
Any questions, guys? I don't. Wendy, are you typing? I was gonna say, it looks like you're typing in the chat, Wendy. Okay. Yeah, the links that you posted were great to try. And like I said, in the coming weeks, week or two, we'll be sending what the requirements will be for the fairs this year. We had a call with all the regional chairs and we kind of hashed some details out just once everyone got back into the swing of things in their school, and also talking about like where they have their fairs and stuff. So they will be virtual, but we will get those requirements out for the fairs shortly. So if you have no other questions, you're free to go. And like I said, we'll send this out, and feel free. I'm just going to keep everyone's email and send reminder emails if you do want to join for next week's presentation. We'll have that. So, well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.